I remember the first time I played Bloodborne. Me and my cousin were bored and had absolutely nothing to play. So we started scrolling through the PlayStation Store until I saw it, Bloodborne. I knew nothing about the game, but the aesthetic of it immediately pulled me in. It looked dark, had that gothic and Victorian vibe to it, and looked exactly like something I wanted to play. So naturally, the first thing I did was check whether it had co-op. Google said yes. In my head, that meant me and my cousin were about to have a great time running through this beautiful world together. But I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I started the game expecting some normal invite button in the menu, but apparently playing Bloodborne with another person required a small university degree. I had to watch multiple YouTube tutorials on how to play with a friend. I understood nothing and eventually decided to play alone until I could get something called the Beckoning Bell. And that was when the horror began. The atmosphere immediately reminded me of an old game I played when I was younger called Nightmare Creatures. So even while Bloodborne was beating the hell out of me, I couldn't stop playing. And when I say it beat the hell out of me, I mean it beat the hell out of me. It took me like 6 hours to reach the cleric beast. 6 hours. For the first 2 hours I was getting killed by normal enemies in the same area the whole time. But for some reason I kept playing. Eventually I managed to beat Vicar Emilia and then dropped the game completely. Which makes the whole thing even stranger because Bloodborne would later become my favorite game of all time. And one of my comfort games. So how does a game that frustrating become something I return to for peace? I didn't understand it at first. You can be in the middle of the worst run. You have no flasks, barely any health, and you're walking through Blighttown or whatever it is. And then you see the fire. You sit down and for a few seconds your body just relaxes. And it kinda makes no sense because everything you just did turned to nothing. You still have to go back there, but for a few seconds you made it somewhere. And maybe you don't even do anything. You just breathe and suddenly this dead world feels calmer than real life. And I think that's why these resting points feel better than they should, because mechanically they're simple. In Dark Souls it's a bonfire, in Bloodborne it's a lamp, in Elden Ring it's a site of grace. Different names, but the feeling is kind of the same. It's that small moment where everything just pauses and you feel like you reached something. And the longer I think about it, the more it makes sense why it's so comforting. Not because the world becomes nice all of a sudden, because it really doesn't. Most of the time that world is still a horrible place and that's part of why it works so good. The bonfire feels good because everything around it is so hostile. If the whole game felt safe, that small pause wouldn't mean as much. And the longer you think about it, the bonfire doesn't feel like just another game mechanic. It feels like something people look for in real life. Sometimes you don't really need someone to solve your entire life. You don't need a speech, advice or someone trying to fix every problem you have. You just need one place where nothing is expected of you. For some people that's a room, and for some that's a person. Maybe it's just sitting somewhere after a long day and finally feeling your body calm down. And I think it hits even harder if you don't have that, because the game gives you something what you're missing in real life. You know what it feels like to be tired with nowhere to put it, and I think that only works because the world around it is so honest about how broken it is. Because if you put a bonfire on some other game, I don't know if it would have the same effect. It would probably just feel like a checkpoint. You sit down, the game saves, maybe you get your health back and then you just keep playing. But it feels different in Souls games, because the world outside of that fire already feels like it's been dead for such a long time. And that's something these games do extremely well. You don't really feel like you're entering a world where everything is waiting for you to become the hero and fix it. The disaster already happened before you even got there. The world is already ruined and you're just walking through the leftovers of that. The game doesn't really try to make the world look better than it is. It doesn't give you a ruined place and then acts like everything is all hopeful. And I think that's why those worlds feels more real than a lot of games that try way harder to be realistic. Because it's not just the graphics or the details, but the feeling that this place isn't trying to convince you that it's okay. And we see that in the real world a lot. You wake up, answer messages, go outside, go to work, talk to people, and even if something feels wrong, the day still keeps going like nothing happened. You don't always get to look as tired as you feel. You don't get to stop because something inside of you feels off. Most of the time you just have to keep acting normal so people don't ask too many questions. And Souls games don't really bother hiding how destroyed their worlds are. If a place is ruined, it looks ruined. If someone is losing themselves, the game lets you watch it happen. If the world has no comfort left in it, it doesn't cover that up with some fake sense of safety just to make you feel better. And weirdly enough, that makes it easier to be there. Because once you accept that the world is already gone, you start paying attention to the things that are still standing. And that's where a lot of the beauty in these games come from. You could say it's just the aesthetics, and yeah, obviously these games look insanely beautiful. But it's not only that. There's a Japanese term that fits this feeling really well, and I'm probably gonna butcher the pronunciation, but still, mono no aware. That sadness you feel when something becomes beautiful because you can already feel it passing. Like a moment you want to hold on to, even though you know it's already leaving. And Souls games have that everywhere. You get to these places way too late. The world had its life before you got there. And most of what you see is what remained after that life was gone. That sounds depressing at first, but then the game it feels beautiful, because the ruins never feel completely empty. That is also what makes those places hurt a little. Firelink is probably the easiest example. You come back there over and over again, and after some time you know the place without thinking about it. You know the fire, the walls, the people sitting around, the voices you hear for a few seconds before you leave again. It starts feeling familiar in a sad way, because nobody there really feels like they are staying. Then later you come back and someone is missing. The game doesn't make a big thing out of it. Their spot is just empty. And you still understand enough from that alone. It feels small, but it stays with you, because it feels like the world kept moving while you were somewhere else trying to survive. The Hunter's Dream gives me that feeling too, just in a different way. After being in Yharnam, it almost feels unreal to stand somewhere that quiet. You hear the music, see the flowers, you walk into the workshop, and for a few seconds it feels like Bloodborne finally lets you exist without hurting you. But the longer you play, the more the place starts feeling like something you were never meant to keep. You can rest there, of course, but it always feels like the dream is going to end sooner or later. And I think that's why these places are so beautiful. They don't have to tell you, hey, look at this place and how beautiful it is. They feel beautiful because you spend time there and return to them when you need a break, and they start meaning something to you. Souls games don't tell you anything. They leave you alone with things, whether it's a place, a feeling, or a question, and that automatically makes you pay more attention. And that goes beyond the atmosphere, and I used to hate that. When I first played Bloodborne, it felt embarrassing how much I was struggling. Nobody was watching me, but I was watching myself, and that was almost worse. Every single death made me more annoyed, and the game kept showing me how impatient I was, how fast I panic, and how quickly I want help when something doesn't work. Your flaws will be shoved into your face. If you get greedy, you see it. If you're not patient, you feel it. If you go into the same fight with the same bad habit, you get sent back with nothing to blame except the thing that you already knew you did wrong. You don't care as much in your first tries, but it gets to a point where you start feeling ashamed because you don't change. You still do the same exact mistakes as before. You should have learned from them, but you didn't. And the game keeps sending you back with what you did wrong, until dying stops feeling unfair, because deep down you know why it happened. Don't get me wrong, you still hate dying, but you understand it better. You come back with the mistake still in your head, the greedy hit or the panic roll, and then the fight gives you that moment again. But it's not a problem anymore, and that teaches me something. Struggling isn't a shame, but doing the same mistake over and over again still hurts. There's this disgusting feeling when it happens again. You feel it in your stomach. You already knew what happened last time, so why do you fall for the same mistake again? The same weak reaction that was supposed to be gone by now. And then all of your promises to yourself about becoming better start sounding stupid. Next time I will stay calm, next time I won't do that again. Then the pressure comes back and the old version of you is right there like it never left. It feels like the progress was fake, like you only changed when nothing was testing you. And the second something touched that wound again, you became exactly the same person again. And that is a hard pill to swallow, because it doesn't feel random anymore. It feels like it's you. That mistake is a part of you, and it knows how to drag that same reaction out of you and make you sit there afterwards with this rotten thought in your head. You knew better, but you still did it. And that is exactly the moment where Souls game starts getting under your skin. After dying so many times, you won't be angry at the boss anymore. They're just standing there doing the same thing like always, but for some reason you keep giving it the same wrong answer. But then there's that one attempt. The same moment comes back, same pressure, same fear, and therefore the same chance to do the same mistake again. But for once, the old you reaches for you, but it doesn't reach your hand. And even before the boss dies, something already feels different. Because the same mistake came trying to get to you, but this time it didn't. All those frustrating attempts changed something. You finally learned. That is why your strength means something. When a boss finally dies, it gets weirdly quiet. The game doesn't stop for a huge emotional moment. Most of the time you just get your souls, blood echoes or runes. The music fades out and you're standing in the same place where you were getting absolutely destroyed a few minutes ago. The fight is over, but you still remember those deaths where you just stared at the screen because you knew exactly what you did wrong and how stupid it was. And that gives your victory more meaning, because a lot of times struggle just feels like struggle while you're inside of it. It doesn't feel meaningful or like growth. It just feels annoying and embarrassing, and sometimes it feels like you are wasting your time being bad at something that everyone else somehow understands, except for you. But then the fight ends, and suddenly even your worst attempts have a place in that story. The death that made you angry mattered. The mistake that embarrassed you mattered. Even the run where you almost quit mattered, because without all of that, there wouldn't be that moment when you finally won. And there's no game that captures that feeling that good. The game shows you that you were changing the whole time, even when it felt like nothing was happening. They take effort that felt invisible and make it visible for you, but you just need to be patient to see it. In real life you can try so hard and still look like you are standing still. Nobody sees how many times you almost gave up and still came back the next day like nothing happened, but you see it in there. And talking about losing, you're not the only one losing, and they make sure to show you that. You see a bloodstain that shows you that others had it even worse, and suddenly you don't feel that stupid anymore. And in a world that lonely, that gives you this weird sense of companionship. Because even when you play alone, it never really feels like you're the only one there. You see bloodstains on the floor and you know another player died in that same spot. You don't know who they are, but you know they were there too. And that's something so small that makes such a big difference. You walk through these dead places, but every now and then the game reminds you that a real person stood where you are standing right now. And summons make that feeling even stronger, because sometimes it isn't just a message or a bloodstain, and instead there's a real person actually in your world. I remember playing Elden Ring and I was using the bird farm to farm runes. And out of nowhere a malicious wanderer joined, dropped me like 2 million runes and then left. I don't know who they were and I don't remember the name, but I still remember that. It was just a random player I will never see again. But for a few minutes this lonely game didn't feel lonely at all. Someone was there to help and left something behind. And that is probably why these worlds never feel completely empty. Because even when everything around you is dying, you still find proof that other people passed through it too. So how did a game that frustrating become my comfort game? I don't really know. I just know that every time I leave these worlds I end up missing them. And when you think about it, it's really weird how peaceful a dying world can be.